There are many ways to solve the skilled trade shortage that we are experiencing right now. My guest today took an extremely unique approach to that by co authoring a book called Trade Up, which is a fictional story that covers the journey of two young people finding their path in the skilled trades. So, let's talk about it. I'd like to welcome to the show John Finan of Finan Home Services. Thanks for appearing on the show today, John. I really appreciate you stopping by today.
Yeah, that's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Nick.
So before we dig into this book, I just want to ask you a few questions off the top
Sure.
to highlight some of your experiences in the trades. Can you describe how or why you got started in the trades, and was there any one that was an influence, or was it simply just a curiosity that you had?
Yeah, sure. So, full candidacy, I'd always planned on going to university and starting a business. Didn't know why I needed to go to university to start a business, but just wanted to, and flunked out horribly and ended up on the street with no skills, with a little bit of debt, which seemed like a lot of debt back then, but compared to today was really nothing. But my intent from high school really was to have my own business. And I really think back on why that was. And it was just, I wanted to have control of my life. And I felt that having a business would get me that. And I had no idea what the business was going to be. It could have been a pizza shop, could have been anything. And so I found myself in my early 20s, 23, 24, wanting to get serious with a young lady who she and I celebrated our 32nd anniversary a couple of weeks ago.
Congrats.
Thank you. And so, with student debt, no skills, you're not really a marketable dude, right?
Right.
So, but I knew I was a hard worker. So if you knew me in high school, and I called you up and said, Nick, come on over to my place for a party, it's probably inviting you to an Amway meeting. I had a whiteboard. I was going to sell you on the whole thing. As soon as I flunked out of university on my 21st birthday, within a couple of days, I was on my way to Ottawa. I was going to start a swimming school. My brother had started one in London many years ago, which my wife and I subsequently took over, and our daughter now runs. But so entrepreneurship was always something I was interested in, and I was never afraid of hard work. So I find myself 23, 24 going, what happened to me? How did I get to this position in my life? And my brother said he knew a bricklayer, and the bricklayer made a lot of money. And he said, jump in the car. It was March. We'll drive over to the job site. It was kind of Masonville, Summerside area, or Summer, whatever that was called. Masonville was called something else back then. And we watched from the warmth of the car in this bricklayer in the cold. This guy was putting bricks in, and I'm 25 cents a brick, 30 cents a brick, whatever it was. And you could just see the dollars rolling as this guy was working. But as I watched him, I went, that's really hard work. And he was maybe 50 at the time, which seems really old when you're 25. It's not so old now.
Right.
But anyway, so I said, that's not for me. But it started this thought that, hey, if I get a trade, and he worked for himself, the bricklayer, and if I get a trade and things don't work out with my business side of it, I can always fall back on the trade. So it was a good backstop. So that's what I did. Called around. Was there any one person? No, there wasn't. There was no tradespeople in my family at all. None that I knew of. I think I might have a couple of uncles that did something similar, but I didn't even know those guys. So I just looked around, and the electrical trade was what jumped up to me first. So that's how I ended up being an electrician.
Now, before we jump into this book, can you paint a picture of what trades were like when you first got your hands dirty in them?
Yeah, so the one thing I'll tell you that's kind of definitely different is when I bought a cordless drill back in 1991. They were like $400, and you had to set them down gently. If you dropped
Yeah.
it, it broke, and they weren't going to repair it because they knew you broke the thing. So everything was done manually, right? So there wasn't a lot of the safety training. So now we do working at heights training. We would do platform safety. Essentially, nobody works on a ladder like we did before.
Right.
So that's probably a good thing. Um, don't remember too many people or anybody really getting seriously hurt on any of the job sites that I was on, and I certainly didn't get hurt, nicks and scratches and that sort of thing. But I would say that part has changed. Cordless tools are really the way everybody's doing anything, which is good. It just lengthens the time that somebody that starts in the trade as they're younger can continue to work, gets the job done faster, more professionally, those kinds of things. In terms of the perception, I think that's really just a one-on-one. I think, as humans, what we do is we tend to make judgments based on, the extremes that we see. So if somebody sees an electrician or a plumber that's doing something amazing, not just in the trade, but in their life, they probably paint the trades as something that's wonderful. Conversely, if you see the guy that's not doing so well on a Friday night at the bar and that guy's whatever, you tend to say that's how they all are. So
Right.
I don't think that really has changed. When I have one-on-one conversations with people, and it might just be my age and what I do, they just say the trades are wonderful. I was at the pool this morning for a swim, and one of the guys at the pool, shouted out an article, and he said, "What you're saying is exactly true." I think he said that because he knows me. Would he have thought that if he was talking to his own high schooler that was looking to go to trade school? I'm not so sure. I think so, but I'm not so sure.
I think it's fair to say that you're a highly successful businessman and you're extremely busy and engaged within the community. I'm wondering what made you put time aside to write this book and how long did it take to complete?
Sure. So, full transparency, I didn't actually do all of the writing. What happened is about maybe 6 years ago, so long before COVID, um, and I'm a list guy. I write things down that I need to accomplish, and pretty much my day is spent just working on that list. So, anybody that knows me thinks it's annoying when I pull out a scrap of paper because we go somewhere, and I remember my brother and I went to Las Vegas for a couple of days, and getting a shoe shine was on my list. So I just had to get a shoe shine. And of course, you don't just get a shoe shine; you find the shoe shine guy, and you have to anyway. So essentially, I wrote about the first two opening chapters of the book between 4:30 and 5:30 in the morning because I'm up that early, and it sort of sat because it got to the point that I didn't know what to do after that. It's a fictional story that follows a couple of high school kids, and my concept was that they were going to learn life lessons, much like, say, the wealthy barber was set up like, as they went from home to home, and they would have conversations with the homeowners as they repaired something in their home. But I just didn't know how to write that. So I reached out to Lisa Brandt, who is the co-writer, and in fact, most of the writing. So she and I would chat for a couple of hours. She would write, a quarter of the book. We would go back and edit. We did that 4 times and we were done. So start to finish, it was a 2-year project. And what prompted me to get it going was really it was COVID. So there was nothing going on, and anything I was going to get myself into was going to be pretty destructive, right? So, the province shut down on, March 15th, say, whenever the prime minister announced that everybody was going to get money to stay home. My phone blew up like at 2 o'clock that day. He's on at 12 or 1. Everybody was gone. So we couldn't work. I've got a building. What am I going to do? Laid off all the staff. And I started thinking dark thoughts. I've lost my business. I've been doing this for 25, 26 years. I'm not really ready for retirement, and I'm certainly not going to give up here, but I have to have some way to sort of recover from this whenever it happens, because it blindsided me as it did probably most people. So I said, let's write this book because I'm probably going to need to replenish my staff because I'm not sure anybody's ever going to come back to work. And then what about my customers? Are they going to call again? So the book was just keep me busy, be prepared for the future, that sort of thing. And then it grew. So we finished it in about, probably 6, 8 months, but then it took me a good 18 months to get it ready for the launch we had a couple of weeks back. And it was sort of like, I read this thing, I sent it out to a number of people to read and sort of give their thoughts back. And it started coming back that, this might be just more than John telling a few good stories. And there might be something valuable to other people. So at first it was my greedy needs that drove it, right? I need staff, I need customers. But as I started to get some feedback about, okay, this is a tool and I better give it the thought that it's due. So we started researching how you market a book, podcast, interviews, getting the word out to friends and family for sure. But I turned it into something much bigger than I'd anticipated in the beginning.
You briefly touched on this on your last answer, but I'm wondering if you just give a brief synopsis of the book itself.
Sure. So it's a fictional story. I'll first say I was asked many times, "Who are these kids? Do I know them?" No, you don't, because we made them up. In fact, Lisa and I were having a chat about what their names were going to be, and I said, "Well, let's see. It's 2020-ish. Let's go back 18 years to 2002. What's the most common names in Google? Well, we've got Madison and Jacob, because that's what the most common names were. That's how we came up with this, with the names of the kids. So basically what it is, the first couple of chapters are a little bit of nonfiction. It's based on Bob Turpin, the main character, contractor, goes into high school, meets his lady he went to high school with as the teacher, and they're talking to high school students about getting into the trades. And that's based on, I didn't know the teacher at the time, but I went into Banting High School, was the high school this one was based on. and talk to kids about getting into the trades. And so it follows at the end. Madison and Jacob come up to Bob at the end and say, hey, we're interested in this tradesy thing. Jacob is not likely going to be going to university. Madison's full on track for university and frankly expected to by her parents. And then the next couple of years follow them as they try trades. So Jacob tries HVAC. He works with the furnace guys for a couple of weeks, decides he doesn't like it, goes to Bob. Bob owns a few companies and says, let's get you set up in contracting that does some woodworking. So he moves on to that path. Madison gets hooked up with Jordan, is her journeyman. Jordan is maybe 10 years older than her. So old enough that he can relate to her, but still old enough that he can teach her. And then they follow the journey through the couple of years as she goes from, can you go get a screwdriver for me and hand it to me, to, running some things on her own. And in Madison's case, it has a very difficult conversation that she has. Wouldn't call it a conversation in some respects. It was more of an argument that goes on for a while with her mother, particularly about getting into the trades. Her mother's not in favor of it and says some pretty brutal things, like probably those conversations go on in households when children choose to go on a path that their parents didn't want, but this is about as deep and brutal as it gets. So
Bob, during the presentation, taps on Patty, who's the teacher in the classroom.
Yep.
Taps on her desk. And he says, you can't automate what we do. Artificial intelligence is becoming increasingly advanced and useful by the day. And there are many jobs being replaced with it currently. Where do you feel skilled trades stand in terms of being replaced by artificial intelligence?
Sure. So Bob's maybe not 100% correct anymore in that. So a lot of stuff can be replaced with automation, AI. I'm not quite sure how that does all of what we do, but certainly in our company, we were testing. We've stopped testing it now. Is a way for our customers to book service appointments themselves. Now, they weren't taking trades jobs away, but rather than have to speak to somebody on the phone, sort of 7:30 to 4:30, you could go in at 2 a.m. and enter pictures and do a few things to book your own appointment. So that will probably scale to the point that some of the on-site stuff won't need to be done. And what comes to mind is video calls. So during COVID, this wasn't something that we actually were doing, but it certainly would have been something we could have done. So if a customer had an iPhone, in fact, maybe our guys did. Customers upstairs, techs in the basement looking at the panel, they may very well have FaceTimed or Zoomed from that platform to show the customer what was going on. So most of what goes on in the on-site work, I don't see how that can ever, what AI crawls through the attic looking for a wire that's not connected, or a pinpoint hole in a plumbing connection. I think somebody has to get in the trenches and do that. But I don't see that as a downside. I see that as a plus, because you're taking an industry that was stagnant, call it trades 1.0, where, Neanderthal man goes, digs hole, puts pipe in ground, fills it up. That's going away, and that will help us improve the trades, because the growth curve for the technician isn't just, go there, do the manual work, somebody else bills it, they tell you where to go next and do the same thing again. And to some degree, that's already happening in the furnace world. One of our manufacturers, probably several of them these days, will have Wi-Fi connected thermostats. So with the customer's permission, we can port in to do some diagnosis on their system. It already happens. So if a customer that has one of these systems put in, if their furnace filter is getting to the point that it needs to be connected or changed, they're connected to the internet. It will send us an email to remind the customer. They see it on their screen as well in their thermostat, right. But should they not look at it, we can see what it is.
Okay.
So I think it's coming, and it's a good thing.
We have OER programs in schools currently, but you mentioned a program inside this book called Ride and Decide to help young people narrow down a focus on what they might like to choose as a trade. What barriers keep a program like this from actually happening today?
Probably the fact that it's not really a real program. Essentially made it up. I think I heard about it from one of our colleagues down in the States, so I'm not even sure it's a program down there. But the idea in the Ride and Decide is that, to call it a high school student, but, let's expand it and let's just say, let's take your kid to work day from 1 day to 2 weeks, and it's called take somebody else's kid to work. Like, why would I want to go with my father to see what he does? I kind of already know. No matter what he does, I hear about it. So there's kind of not a lot of value in that. It's just, rainbows and puppy dogs when you go to mom or dad's work, I suppose. So if you can go to the neighbor who's a plumber and you can work with him for a couple of weeks, not only do you get a better sense of who that person is, but you'll get a really good sense of the trade and all of the things around it. So, if I was designing that, and let's just say for argument's sake that not every minute and every day of a school year is wisely used, are there 2 weeks that any student at any point could uh, take off and go work with some other group? So whether it's an actuary or whether it's a doctor or whether it's an electrician or a plumber, why not?
Mm-hmm.
Give them an idea. They see the full effect. As you see from the characters in the book, Madison and Jake, they learn a lot about people from being with them on the job sites and seeing them in their natural environment.
Right.
So I think it would be a great idea and frankly easy to implement. And we have, I don't know how many high schools there would be here in London, but let's say there's 20 in the whole area, maybe there's even more. Instead of putting shop classes in every single one of them or shop classes in 6 of them and then kids have to port in, there's shop classes everywhere. This house is a shop class. You just bring the electrician and the student in to fix a problem and poof, you've got the best shop class you're ever going to see.
Yeah, no kidding.
So
75% of the job market is hidden.
Yep.
Is referenced in this book. Could you explain what that means for the viewers?
Sure. Yeah, and the number's probably low, and it doesn't matter what job category you're looking for. Essentially, when you're looking for work, there'll be ads not in the paper probably, but there'll be online ads. There'll be all kinds of different ways that companies are reaching out electronically to people. But the reality is that one of the things we've done in our company for a long time is that we will offer a bonus, and it's a crazy number, $5,000, if you can help us recruit somebody that you know. You don't even have to know them, I suppose, but if you can help us bring somebody in. So over the next 2 years, you'll get $5,000. And you say, well, that's a crazy number, but what it does is it makes sure that employee is engaged with their community. So their friends, their family, neighbors, anybody they think might be a good fit. Now, of course, there's caveats. The person has to be around. You can't hire them day one, they're gone day two, and I'm going to give you a big check. They have to be around for a period of time. And I suspect most companies do some version of that. We all want to have sort of warm introductions to new people. If you're going to bring somebody into your home, you're not going to invite 7 other strangers to sit around a table and have a dinner for 8. You're going to invite, maybe your brother that brings his new girlfriend. She's new, but she's vetted,
right?
And vice versa. So I think that's what's out there. And for young people or any person that's looking to get a job in any career, they're really just going to have to tap their resources that they know personally. And, going back to 1989, I think, when I started looking for an apprenticeship, knew nothing about it, and there were no online resources. So it took me a while to figure out that there was this ratio that companies had to meet and that it was important. And then who could hire me? And I just, called high school friends that probably didn't even know me. If I knew a guy that had been in the trades or knew somebody in the trades and I was able to get his phone number or her phone number, I was calling them.
Right.
And I think I started in January or February, and it seemed like it was way too long. But by April, I was working. And as any employer would do even these days, they tell you, look, work hard for 3 months and we'll sign you up, or we'll fire you. Because if you're not good enough to sign up, I'm going to kick you to the curb, and that's just the way it's going to be. And I'm sure it's the same these days.
Mm-hmm. Madison's employer gives her a lesson on taxes and expensing at one point in the book.
Mm-hmm.
It makes her pause and consider her future goals of running a business and the additional education necessary. Can you speak to that from personal experience?
Yeah, I wish I had a guy like Bob in my life early in the career to sort of help me understand that. In my case, I just kept my eyes open and I worked for many employers doing my apprenticeship because it's all about hours. And if you're not working, those hours aren't adding up. So I was probably with easily 10 different companies in the 5 years, some just for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. But it kind of speaks to the name of the book, Trade Up, is a play on words. So it's the trades, of course, but it's also the journey that you take in your career. And I may have told this story before, but my very first electrical apprentice started with me I'm going to say 1980, 98. And 4 years later, 5 years later, he wrote his C of Q, got his license as an electrician. And we were a small company with just a few, and my brother knew Jason well. And I said, good news, Jason got his electrical license, has finally done his apprenticeship, and he's grown up now. And my brother said something like, wow, that's depressing. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he goes, now he's got to look forward to a life of doing the same thing for the next 40 years. And at the time, I didn't think enough to push back or think clearly about that. But the trade up portion of our book is the trades, but it's also the fact that your journey needs to be growing. So, Jason's not with our company anymore, but my hope is that where he's at now, he's running jobs. Maybe he's sitting in an office estimating, maybe he's still on the tools. Jason would be mid 40s probably by now, I think. So, the vast reality is that most people, whether you enter the trades or whether you go to university with a degree in social sciences, good chance you won't be doing when you're 50 what you were doing when you were 23, and a good chance you're certainly not doing what you planned on doing when you were in high school. So that portion is really just showing that there's the opportunity to start your own business, grow from there. Whether Madison aspires to that, I guess we don't really reveal that in the book. We don't know. Maybe she does, maybe she doesn't. But I would say that, I don't know what percentage, but it's not small of tradespeople at some point strike on their own and start their own business.
It's an excellent point, because a lot of people outside the trades think these are dead end career paths.
Yeah.
And I actually saw a tweet the other day, Monty McNaughton, our Minister of Labor, put
Yep.
out. And it was something to the effect of labor, apprentice, journey person, foreman, owner. And it just showed the forward progression or the upward trajectory that you can have in a skilled trade.
Yeah. One of the controversial parts, although I've been hearing it's not as controversial as I was expecting it to be, is I lay out in that class with Patty the teacher, Bob the contractor, Patty the teacher, script out what an apprentice will make over 7 years.
Right.
And because I choose 7 years, because if at that same moment somebody goes to university for their first day and their intent is to become a teacher, we want to follow and see how the money breaks down. So we do 4 years of undergrad, which is what you need to go to teacher's college. So there's a cost to that. And then you go to teacher's college for 2 years. There's a cost to that. And then you teach for a year. So you've got all of this money that you spent, and then you've got this money that you earned. How much is left over after 7 years doing the teaching path? Not a lot. And then let's follow that apprentice for the first year when they make next to nothing and everybody laughs at them like they did with me. And then a little bit more. And then when they're earning a journeyman wage, that's not a bad number. You take that for those same 7 years, that number's pretty massive.
Absolutely.
And when we wrote it, our intent was really just to show that massive gap. So the massive difference, it's like a bunch of wind in the sails of the apprentice as opposed to a headwind for the person going to university.
You touched on this in the beginning here, but Madison's mom at one point suggests something to the effect that no one chooses to be an electrician. It's something that some people end up doing. Can you speak to that thought process and why many parents might have this view?
Yeah, I tell you, that is brutal. I don't think, I'm trying to think back because you hear people say, I do this because they told me I couldn't and I wanted to prove them wrong. And I'm thinking, I don't know. I don't remember anybody ever telling me I couldn't do anything. Maybe they did and I just didn't listen, but I didn't listen like most kids to most things that were said to me. But I think that perception is now changing. I think there's enough people, and it's probably more the kids than the parents. I think there's enough parents and enough grandparents, because that's what I am now, seeing that a university degree and all the money and time didn't necessarily get you where you are. So, and I think at our book launch, I mentioned my daughter for sure, because she bought a family business that we had. She runs it very successfully. The kid took it and grew it massively. And I said, you probably could have done that when you were 16. And she said, Dad, I could have done it when I was 14. Maybe not. But she had 4 years of university that we paid for, and she went off to that. My son is currently a truck driver, loves it. He went to college for a couple of years to get into business and financial planning. Got the job that he actually wanted right from the beginning with one of the big banks. And on his first year anniversary, he came home and said, "This is not for me. I want to leave and I want to be a truck driver." Really? So there's enough people at my stage in life and even a little bit younger that are going, not a good use of time and talent, and certainly not the money. That money could have been used for other things. And I'm not talking groceries. I'm talking about give it to the kid to use for buying a house or a rental property, as Jordan, our journeyman in the book, does. We wanted to make sure we had characters that were doing real life things. And, we all know people that that took just a little bit of money and leveraged it into something much bigger, because not only did they work hard, but they just saw an opportunity that maybe they were going to jump on and somebody else didn't.
Madison does something at one point in this book, and we're starting to see a lot of young people do this that are working in the skilled trades. And it's taking it upon herself to do what she can to change the perception of the skilled trades. Speaking to her principal, she eventually reaches out to the Minister of Labor and so on. Why is this such an important part highlighted in the story? Or at least it's important to me.
Yeah.
But was it important to you to highlight that?
It was. And in fact, Lisa would probably tell you if she were here, I had hundreds of messages I needed to get across, and like, you can't write them all. Right. So I had to be really careful. But the message in that one is that, and he's passed away now, but there's a speaker that I have tapes and cassettes on called Jim Rohn, famous guy, lessons in life, many different things. And he had a saying, it was called, work harder on yourself than you do on your job. And on the surface of it, no employer would want to hear that. But as an employer that has employees, actually, I want good quality people that think about themselves and want to promote themselves and work hard to do good things in the world, whether it's for my business or frankly just for themselves, as long as it's not at the expense of others. So that really is the genesis of that. We wanted Madison to show that you don't just go to work at and television. I'm thinking of the Flintstones, because my grandkids, when they come over, and now we're sleeping in the tent for the summer, but on Saturday nights, but when we're in the house and we're sleeping in bed, I don't want to read them stories that I read to their mother. Boring for me. They probably don't care. So we watch the cartoons. So we're watching the Flintstones. And, think about Fred Flintstone. He gets his lunch pail. He picks up Barney. They go to the break rocks all day. They come home at the same time. And this is not the way life is. Right. And it probably never was for tradespeople. It certainly isn't now. So I wanted to make sure people understood that you take your job seriously, but take the career and yourself within that career much more seriously. So I think what Madison is doing is she's setting herself up for success where she is now, but also wherever she may be, essentially trading up. She's ready for the next opportunity.
Before we jump into the last few questions, I'm going to reveal what I have here.
Sure, I'm excited now.
What I do all the time on all my shows is I make something for the interview. That is the whole premise of the Nick Clicks Some Skills, is the cooking/interview show.
Okay.
So it was my first time making this. I'm not sure how well they turned out, but I tried to make homemade cannolis.
That's amazing.
And I don't know if you have a nut allergy. I probably should ask you that.
No, I'm not at all. No.
So I have two different varieties here. One is a mixed nut, and one is
chocolate. And so, we the only ones here?
We're the only ones.
We get 40.
There's a lot, right? That's the whole gimmick of the show, is cooking, and we'll see how this turned out.
Well, that's amazing. Yep. Well, I thought little old bow-legged nonis were the only ones that could make these things, but good for you.
Outside of the book itself, what message do you have for a student, parent, educator that you'd like to share today?
There's two things, I suppose, that just jumped to my mind. And one of them is that, the conventional wisdom, it might be right. 50-50. Is it good? Is it bad? There's 50% chance of either. So think about everything in terms of what are the outcomes going to be. So, as I said at the beginning, when I spoke to this class at Banting, there were 30 students. They were all going to university. No question, that was the way it was going to go for them. And when I asked a couple of them what they were going to do, they were going to be in, math, science, engineering. They're all going to get to the tops of their fields as well. And the reality, though, is that 40% of first-year students don't graduate. So 12 of those kids are not graduated, probably. And the ones that did, maybe 4 or 5 of them got to exactly where they wanted. So a very small percentage. So when you think about what your journey is going to be, and I'm going to go to university, and, because as I was sharing with you at the beginning, when I found myself at, literally on my 21st birthday, getting a letter from the Dean of Social Sciences saying, Finan, you're out, basically getting fired. I'd been there for 2 years. I'd paid to be there, but this was basically a you're fired letter and don't come back, at least for a year. But in my case, I said, I won't be coming back. I just sort of thought about it, and I want kids to think about where they're going to get to and what's likely to happen to them, because being that 21-year-old with no money, no job skills, a little bit of debt on the books that had to be paid for, and no real essence of where I was going to go was not a good position. And when I think back on it now, I didn't know it back then, but when I think back on it now, I realize there was never any pathway there wasn't much of a pathway for success. When I finished grade 11 or grade 12 at Lucas High School, that was my third high school and I think my 11th school. We'd moved around a lot, with the exception of an older brother that had gone to university. I think my mom had grade 6, my dad had grade 10, and dad had passed away when I was very young, so didn't know that. There was no indication from my marks at school that I was going to be good at university. It was my sister that said, "Hey, I got a great idea." As I get to the end of grade 12, and I got 46 in math and 44 in chemistry, and I wasn't going to get past grade 12 to get to grade 13 and go to university with all of my friends. So I thought, well, let's just go to the math teacher. Maybe she'll take pity on me. And she did. She said, "I'll give you 50 under the provision that you don't come back and take math." And I promised I wouldn't do that. And my sister found a college program at Humber College at the time that was basically set up for people that were transitioning from careers. So in our particular class were convicts, just gotten out of jail. They got their GED in university, but they still needed a little bit more to get to university. There were people that were on social assistance. There was actually a guy that had a massive knee injury. He was a Boston Bruins high draft pick and didn't make it, and they were paying for him to go to this program so that he could get on to university. So it was basically set up as a one-year gateway to university. So I took that program, and let's face it, it was T-ball for academics. So when I got there, all of a sudden I realized, wow, I'm actually a really smart guy. Get to university, that's not what it was set up for. It was
Right.
just an illusion.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just want kids to really think deeply about what their success looks like. And if it looks like, and the kids in that class back, those 30 students, the 4 or 5 that made it exactly where they wanted, they knew, they knew I got this. 20 of them knew that, well, it's going to be a struggle, but I'm going to give it my best shot. You're probably not going to make it. Find a different path,
Mm-hmm.
a path that gives you that backstop. Like I said, when I started in business, one of the reasons the electrical trade appealed to me is because it was that backstop. Because you know what? Failing in business wasn't bad when I was a licensed electrician. I was not going to be out of work for long.
As an employer, can you share with the audience 3 things that you're looking for in a would-be apprentice?
Yeah. So in terms of what we're looking for, like as in I'm sitting down at an interview and these are the things that I want to see, we've hired multiple people over the years. The reality is I'm probably not going to get what I want right. I'm just going to get a sense. But here's 3 things that you should do. And it doesn't matter whether you're in the trades or anything else. This is absolutely crucial to your success, is come to work every day. And what I mean by that is literally be there at 7:30 if that's when they start. Be a bit earlier, that's not a bad thing. And stay a little bit later, that's also a good thing. But physically be there. I was at a graduation ceremony for a second careers program a number of years ago. And the guy that was doing the talk, the instructor, he was saying to them, you've been in this program for 8-10 weeks. You've learned some skills. Job prospects are looking good for you. Your life is about to change for the better. But he says, here's the thing. Getting a job is easy. Keeping a job, that's hard.
For sure.
And what's hard about that isn't the physical work. It's what do you mean I got to get up 5 days a week and go to work? I only want to get up a few of those days.
Yeah.
So I'm going to tailor my expenses and whatever so that I only have to go to work for 4 days. That isn't a successful career. So be there every single day. And the second thing is set yourself a personal standard that this is who I am and I'm only going to work to that standard. You can't always do it. So I'll share with you an example. And this is who I would look to hire without even an interview. So go to a couple of different gyms, but Mondays and Fridays I go to the aquatic center, 6 a.m. So I'm in there. There's 4 or 5 of us that are regulars there. And you think, oh, in the pool at 6 a.m., John, aren't you something? Well, when I get there at 6 a.m., guess who's in there and has already been swimming for half an hour at 5:30 is the teenagers that go to Banting. So these are the elite swimmers that are deciding they want to take swimming as a serious endeavor. So they've transitioned to Banting High School because it's right beside the aquatic center. And their parents, sometimes maybe them, drop them off at 5:20 because my daughter was one of them. And when I dropped her off at 5:21, she scolded me, Dad, it's not acceptable. 5:21 means I'm late. You need to up your game, Dad, if you're going to keep driving me. So Those kids are in there. They've already put in a half an hour. We swim for an hour. We swim 2,800 meters today. And when we get out, guess who's still in the pool? These are like 14 to 17-year-olds. Like, that's dedication. And I don't know any of the kids, don't know what their goals are, but I can tell you that the level of dedication they have and the commitment and the ability to just plain roll out of bed at, probably 4:45. Because if you're in the water at 5:30 and you live in Oak Ridge, maybe it's only a 10-minute drive. But if you live in the East End of London, which some of them do, and probably some live outside of London, they're up pretty early. That level of dedication cannot be siloed just to swimming. They have to put it into all of their other endeavors. So work being one of them. So that would be the thing. Set your level of commitment you're going to give to stuff and that standard. And then the next one is a real simple one, and it's not one that would have come up 12 years ago. But stay off your phone. If you're at work and I'm looking at you and you're doing that, consider it something like scratching your butt or picking your nose, because you shouldn't be doing it in public, especially if you're getting paid to do it. So that would be the thing. There's no emergency, that you probably even need a cell phone for if you're a 22-year-old at work that, you're going to race home for, because most things, actually, it's interesting. I'll show you after my lunch pail. So today is the 23rd. My daughter turns 30. And back 30 years ago, there were no cell phones. There were only pagers. And I rented a pager for the couple of weeks before my daughter was born. And it was our first child. So, kind of stupidly, and my wife is, a get at it lady herself anyway. Got up in the morning. We were living north of London. My job was in Sarnia. We would go to Strathroy. 5 of us would get in the van, and I was one of the lower guys on the totem pole. So I'm sitting on a roll of wire in the back going to Sarnia. And my wife had made some indication that today might be the day she was going to have the baby. And of course, she goes off to work. She has a dentist appointment at noon and a doctor's appointment after that. And then, I don't know, about 2 o'clock, my beeper beeps. That's all it does, is beep, 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 beep. I'm like, okay, can only mean one thing. Call her office. She's not there. Call the dentist. She never showed up. Call the doctor's office. Turns out that my wife came in, and the doctor said, "You're in labor. You're in labor. Let's call your husband." Well, we can't call him. He's at work. And so the doctor put my wife in her car and drove her to St. Joe's, parked the car, and said, "I'll be back in a couple hours." So I'm racing back from Sarnia in this van. But stay off your phone. That would be the key to kids these days. Just do your work, and don't waste the company's time, money. So you're not going to last.
That's a tough one to sell to the young generation, but it's so true. Where can the public find Trade Up if they're interested in purchasing this book?
Sure. The simplest way is to go to Amazon.com. It's available. You put Trade Up, and there's several books with that name. So you're looking for the cover with the tradesperson on it, or put Trade Up John Finan. It'll come up. So it's available, and Amazon is quite amazing. It's probably 2 o'clock right now. I bet you if you order the thing, could be here by Monday.
Yeah, for sure.
So, and then Kindle, of course. So Kindle is as well. So download it to your e-reader, whatever you use. It's available there, and frankly, it's half the cost on Kindle. So why wouldn't you?
Right.
So, and if anybody sees me driving around town, I usually keep a box in the back of my pickup truck. So happy to sell you a book and sign it at the same time. So,
I think it's an excellent book, and I was tweeting about this, or I was across all my socials talking about this, and how I think this is a valuable resource that should be in schools. And I'm hoping at one point we get something like this in a school for young people to read, because it does cover a lot of the stigmas and the stereotypes of them that are in the trades that have been plaguing us for many, many years. And it does paint a realistic picture of the progression in a trade, the options that are out there. We talked about the finances and the debt load and everything versus a university degree versus a trades degree. And I think this book has endless possibilities and messages that should be shared with everybody.
I appreciate you saying that, Nick. That's quite good. And my first thought is available in school maybe means nobody wants to read it because the teacher thinks you should read it. But hey, that's not a bad idea. I'd be okay with that.
Last question, John. Is there going to be a sequel?
That's a great, the list person in me says, oh, absolutely, Nick. There's going to be lots of sequels. The short answer is I don't know. I hadn't really thought about that. Certainly, the way I would go about making that decision is if I felt that there was something valuable to add to what I've done here, then I would. My first thought is there wouldn't be, because this just gets the people into the trade. So what would the next book be for a 23, 24-year-old that's sort of into their working career? I mean, my kids probably have heard all of my stories, and my kids, seem to be doing quite well for themselves. So probably they listen to some of that. So maybe John Finan's ego says, yeah, write a book, all the things I taught my kids that seemed to work out. And here's the stupid things I did that didn't work out so well. Maybe that's the book.
Mm-hmm.
You could screw something up by just saying the wrong thing at the wrong time.
That sounds like a great book, actually.
Yeah. We'll have to put that on the list.
Well, John, I want to thank you for appearing on the show today and discussing Trade Up and sharing your experiences with the audience today. Like I said many times, I thought it was a very powerful book. It was very important and informative, and it really highlights a lot of the opportunities that are out there in the skilled trades. So again, thank you for appearing on the show today. It's been a pleasure.
Excellent, thanks, and thanks for the cannolis. They're terrific. Actually, I haven't had a cannoli. My wife and I were in Italy for a couple of weeks, and I didn't have a cannoli when I was
there.
there. So they're good. Well done.
She's missing out then.
Yeah. She's not going to get one, by the way. Won't even tell her I had it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
She'll see it when the video comes out, though.
Yeah, there you go.
And remember, friends, start hungry, stay handy. We'll catch you in the next one.